Hello, welcome to this video that we're calling Design Considerations. So what we're going to talk about in this video is the importance of slowing down to recognize when multiple designs are possible. We'll talk about weighing the pros and cons of different design choices, including how readable or maintainable the code is, how scalable and how performant code is, and then also choosing a design. So to start this conversation, let's just identify what our current design actually is, and we'll talk specifically about collisions. So currently, the player has the trigger. The player has on trigger enter. And so this is attached to the player, and whenever the player collides with an obstacle or a coin, the player collision script attached to the player is the script that runs the code. And so this is similar to thinking about if you walk up to a door, the door doesn't know you're there, right? If the player collides with a coin, the coin doesn't know that the player is there. It's only when the player goes and pushes a button, or the person pushes a button, or the player calls on trigger enter, that's when the coin finds out that the player is there. So that's our current design. And there's actually another way we could do this. So we could actually give every obstacle on trigger enter. If we take a look back at our code for a second, our obstacle and our coin scripts don't have on trigger enter. They just have a method and a field, but the player collision has on trigger enter. So if we look back at this graphic, on trigger enter could be attached to every coin, every obstacle, and this is like an automatic door that senses when the player is there. The player doesn't have to do anything. The player just shows up, or this cat shows up, and the door just opens, or the coin or the obstacle calls on trigger enter and does something with that. And so to be clear, we're not talking about a different user experience for the actual person playing this game. We're just talking about a different way to code this. But there's actually two different ways to code this. And so the question comes up, well, which one is better? And I say better a little bit knowing that there's not necessarily one right option. But how do we weigh these different options? And so here are a few things to consider. So readability or maintainability. How simple is the design? And the key thing here is if you come back to it after 3 months, which is very common in a pretty complicated game, will you understand your code? And if not, well, it might be a bit too complicated. So simple is usually better. Another one is scalability. So how easy is it to expand this game to make it 2 times bigger, or 10 times, or 50 times bigger? And also, how would the performance change? Because often when you're starting to program, you say, well, like when you're starting to code a game, we will say, well, this works for now, but I don't just need one obstacle in my game. I need hundreds or thousands of obstacles. Well, is this still going to be able to, like, am I still going to be able to make this without losing my mind? And so that's scalability. And performance is related here. It's especially saying as I add 10 or 50 or 1,000 obstacles, does this code slow the program down? And how often does it run? So if 1,000 obstacles are calling a certain function every frame, well, it might be time to look at the performance a little bit, especially if it's slowing it down. But performance is probably the least important out of these three. We want to focus on readability and scalability. So my challenge for you in this video is to just make a quick list of what you think the pros and cons might be for both having the player call on trigger enter, which is our current design, versus having obstacles call on trigger enter. So I will let you pause the video, try to find at least one pro and con for each of these two options, and I'll see you in a couple minutes. Okay, welcome back. Good job for trying the challenge. So here's a couple things that I came up with. These aren't the only ones you could think you might have thought of, but here's a couple. So for the player having the trigger, which is our current design, I think one of the benefits of that is that only one on trigger enter is needed. And so that makes it pretty simple to identify, well, where in the code is on trigger enter being run, as opposed to having it on every every object that's out there that we're running into. But a drawback might be that the player needs to check what type of obstacle it's colliding with. And so taking a look at our code, here on trigger enter is getting a little bit long. It's a good 20 lines long at this point. Without having that much complexity. We're detecting coins and obstacles, and I could imagine having many different types of things in here eventually too, ramps and power-ups, etc. And so that's maybe a drawback, is that the complexity of this particular method has increased because that player is responsible for determining what we're colliding with. Now, if we were to switch this and put on trigger enter on every obstacle, one advantage might be that every obstacle can manage its own logic. And so instead of having this complicated method on trigger enter in the player where it's distinguishing different types of objects, well, in this case, the coin could just do what a coin does in on trigger enter, and an obstacle could just do what an obstacle does. But a drawback might be that then we have many, maybe hundreds or thousands of different objects that could call on trigger enter, which could make it harder to find bugs if they show up, I should say when they show up later. So that's a bit of the discussion. Now, it might not be clear, well, which one is the best way forward here, and that's okay. It's not necessarily about figuring out which way is the best way right away. It's just being aware of the different options, so that if and when we encounter bugs, we realize, well, yeah, there could be another way to do this, and we might want to consider that. So for us, we're going to keep doing it the same way, and it just takes some experience to kind of figure out which way you want to keep doing it. But we're going to do it the same way as we have been, by having the player collision script have on trigger enter. And we're actually going to see in the next video how we can leverage that using interfaces to make our code. I guess interfaces are a way to, it's a design choice that we're going to make to help our code stay organized. So that's it for this video. I encourage you to continue to think about different ways that different design choices that you have to make in your code as you keep going through these videos. But for now, that's it for this one, and we'll see you in the next video.